You were county attorney when that case was indicted and tried, right?
Correct, yeah.
Now, did you work with or for, or did you supervise the AG's role in that case at all?
Well, no, this is a serial murder case. It was a case of extreme significance, and some people think you're exaggerating when they hear this part of the story, but, you know, this guy Coolidge had so many people in this community scared that every hardware store in the city of Manchester and thereabouts sold out of locks after the second murder. That's the degree of peril that people felt. As county attorney, it had been traditional for the county attorney to be involved. The Attorney General's office headed a task force that I've never seen since, or before nor since. But they put together a crew of people throughout the state, police officers from Keene, Berlin, Portsmouth, and so forth. They took over the National Guard Armory in Manchester on Canal Street, and for 3 or 4 weeks, or I don't know how long, but for a long time, they conducted the investigation trying to find this guy, and finally found him, Edward Coolidge.
Okay, let's, because some folks may not know about this case at all. Who were his victims, and why was this case so highly publicized?
Well, his victims were young teenagers. I think this first victim was a Sandra Valade. Although he's never been convicted, it's generally regarded that he was the man. I say that because that's a general regard in the profession, that that's the way it was. I have some insight, but I make that because of the general reputation. Sandra was probably 12, 13 years old. His next victim was Pamela Mason, who again was 12, 13, 14 years old, and she had responded to an ad on the bulletin board in the laundry, public laundry, to babysit. And so he arranged to have her babysit, but actually wound up murdering both girls, probably a season or two apart. And then the manhunt was to find who had done these things. There were similarities between the two cases, and people kind of generally thought that whoever did one did the other. And so there was a tremendous a really great credit to the state of New Hampshire, the way they put that task force together and exhausted every lead that they could find and finally found the person. So that's not easy to do. That's pretty much like looking for a needle in a haystack a lot of times.
And they bring their findings to you as the county attorney?
Well, at that point, Bill Maynard, the Attorney General, was in charge of the investigation, and he had Alexander Kalinsky as his associate. So those two persons were concerned with that case as much as I was, and theoretically more because they were of higher stature than I. But I was involved at every stage in the investigation of it and preparation when we finally got a suspect. And that's a part of the case, by the way, that wound up going to the United States Supreme Court. As part of the preparation for the case, Bill Maynard reached a point where he felt that he could issue a warrant for the search of Coolidge's home. And the tradition in those days was that any justice of the peace could issue a search warrant or an arrest warrant. And so Bill Maynard made the mistake of issuing the warrant himself. In those days, it was not considered a mistake because it was done all the time. The police would issue, the desk sergeant would be a justice of the peace and issue a warrant for the search of a car or a home or whatever. So it was not considered wrong in those days. And it was not really an issue in the trial of the Coolidge case, so far as I really worked with it, that the search warrant had been issued by the chief investigative official. But after the aftermath of the trial and the appeal process, one of the refinements that caught the eye of the national lawyers that wound up handling the case was the fact that Bill Maynard had signed the warrant for the searching of the premises that yielded the gun and a few other things. And so the case wound up in the Supreme Court as a post-conviction matter, and the case was reversed. The conviction was set aside. The theory of the reversal was that a search warrant should be issued only by an independent judicial magistrate, one not connected with the investigation, which, when you say it today, it sounds, hey, could it ever been different?
Yeah.
It sounds very simple, but again, if you go through the common law history, you'll find out that the Attorney General or the police or anyone that wore the hat of a Justice of the Peace did over and over and over again issue these warrants. So anyway, that's the way the law develops, and that's what turns out to be a kind of a world-famous case, State versus Coolidge.
Just to finish that off, I understand that after his conviction was reversed, he then entered a plea to second-degree murder. Is that what happened?
It might have even been to first degree, but he wound up getting a lesser term. He was a first-class candidate for the death penalty, but the jury had not awarded death on the first trial.
I was going to ask you about the trial itself, as you went through it. Anything unusual about the actual trial?
Well, it stands in my mind as a kind of my career case. I mean, I was only one of 3 lawyers, but I was very active in the trial of the case. I dealt with all the witnesses that were within the community. We had another section of the case that was scientific, because we had hair evidence and fiber evidence, which was new in those days. We had a neutron activation process issue, which was again new scientifically. And I, as I said, was very active. I cross-examined Coolidge, took care of a number of the witnesses, and wound up cross-examining probably the most important witness, which was the bullet examiner, the ballistic expert, so to speak, in the case. And the case was very, very exciting and very, very serious, and there were some very significant factual issues that came out that were somewhat unexpected in the trial, one of which was that the defendant was basically able to prove that the gun that was set forth in the indictment as the weapon, that he didn't own it at the time that it was supposedly used to kill someone. So we had our ups and downs.
How long was the jury out on it?
Less than a day. I remember going home completely exhausted and going to bed, and getting a call around 7:30, 8 o'clock that night announcing that the jury had returned with a guilty verdict.